So, hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited. So we're gonna make these are actually, I think, my favorite cookies for Passover because they are so easy, delicious. You're not even gonna believe they're kosher for Passover. You don't even need a mixer. So it's really, really simple. I'm just gonna go over the ingredients real fast. I don't remember the exact amount, so you can correct me if you want to. So we have some butter. It's room temperature, but it doesn't have to be. You can just use it from the fridge. We have some salt, just, regular or kosher salt. That's okay. We have some light brown sugar. I actually got questions about this. We have 1 tablespoon of an egg white, which I know is slightly weird, but if you use more than 1 tablespoon, it does change the consistency of the cookie. So, I really recommend using that. And also you get a lot of cookies, so that's good. We have vanilla. So this is real vanilla extract. And we have almond meal. You can use almond flour, whichever works for you. I actually tried to use a camera right here where I'm going to be cooking the butter and the sugar. So I think maybe you can see this some of the times. So the first thing we're going to do, just going to turn this a little bit so you can also see no matter what. The first thing we're going to do is actually I like to turn my oven on for this. So if you're using Fahrenheit, that would be 350 degrees. And if you're using Celsius, for some reason, that would be 180. I'm going to turn mine on 180 degrees. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to melt the butter and the salt. So I'm going to grab just a spatula, but I also have a whisk right here. And if we have any questions at any time, just let me know. So I'm going to add my butter to a clean pot. And then my salt. And I just want to make sure if I place this here, you can see this, right? Or is it better if I place it here?
Either one is fine.
Okay, great. So I'm going to place this here. So this is really quite simple. The only thing we want to do is to melt this together. Just going to set this aside. So I'm just going to say a few things about these cookies while we're melting. So this is really, they're basically like caramel, like lace cookies. And the beauty about these cookies is that you can fill them with anything you want. So I'm going to use Nutella today, but you can use any spread that you like. It could be chocolate spread. It could be peanut butter. It could be really whatever you enjoy. So it's really nice. It has a nice crunch to it. Yeah. And turn the heat slightly. I think the scariest part of making this cookie is when we add the light brown sugar, which is going to be right when we're done melting the butter, because it kind of seems like it's going to separate. And I really want to show you how we deal with that. Okay, so my butter is melted. Maybe I'll show it here as well. Thanks. The phone camera shows it better though. You can see it on the phone camera, right?
Yes, we can. It looks great.
Amazing. Great. So at this point, not boiling yet, I'm adding my light brown sugar. And now I actually want to cook this to a boil and I really want the sugar to start melting. So it kind of looks grainy at this point, which is okay. And the thing about butter, once it reaches a certain temperature, is that it kind of separates from whatever it is that you're making. Even if you're making regular caramel or taffy sauce or stuff like that, the butter will seem to be separating. And what I want to tell you is that it's okay. So once this whole thing cools down, it will become one again. So if you can see it, you really see that there's the sugar and the butter. But you can also see that it starts to boil. And then you can see that the brown sugar is starting to melt. So what I want is I really want it to melt before I remove it from the heat. So I'm just going to give it another minute, like so, once it's boiling, and then I'm going to remove it from the heat. So this is what I mean when I say it's the scary part. So now it actually kind of fools us because it seems like now it's one, like it's more homogeneous, but it's really, once I pour it to a separate bowl, it's going to separate again, which is totally fine. So I'm going to, now at this point, once it looks like this, I'm going to remove it from the heat. I'm going to return to this camera. And I'm actually going to pour this whole thing to this bowl. So I'm going to try and do it so that you can see it. There you go. Very, very boiling. Steaming hot, so don't touch it. All right. This is what it looks like. Not the most attractive right now. And right now at this point, I'm going to add my almond meal. So you can use almond meal, you could use flour, ground almonds. As long as they're finely ground, you're good. You can use other nuts as well if they're ground, and that totally works. So I'm going to add this in. And I'm going to whisk this together. And then we'll see that the butter will start to separate again. So you can really see that there's like butter and then the rest of this batter, which is totally fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it cool for just a little bit, which is going to help the consistency. Do we have any questions?
Indeed, we do. So
amazing.
Yes. So the first one was actually almond flour or ground almonds. And I think you answered that one already. You said those are interchangeable.
Yes, absolutely. Again, as long as you make sure that your almonds are ground finely.
We have another question here, which is, can you use margarine instead of butter?
Yeah, definitely. And then you can make it parb, and you can also use a parb filling. So absolutely.
Someone here has also asked, some of these you've already answered. I'm just going over them anyway. Is the egg white from one egg tray? Should you measure? You said you should measure.
I mean, with a tablespoon. I didn't actually use a scale for it, if that's the question. But yeah, I always have egg whites because, I'm making challahs and I'm making babkas and, so I always have egg whites. So I just use 1 tablespoon.
Any substitute for the egg white?
Unfortunately for this recipe, no. I know that for other recipes, you can use substitute this. For this, no. Because it really ties everything together, which is what we want for this cookie.
What temperature do you heat the sugar mixture to, or how many minutes are you heating?
So what I did with the sugar is once the butter just melted, I added the sugar in, and then I cooked it to a simmer, and then I just kept on cooking it as it's boiling for about a minute or 2, and that's it. I didn't use, I didn't check the temperature. I just made sure that it was completely melted before I removed it from the heat.
There's also a question here, which is, coming up quite a bit. Is Nutella kosher for Passover?
So we actually discussed this before we started the class, and I think it's kosher for some people. I think it depends on if you're Sephardic or Ashkenazi, and also on your personal preferences. But if you're not, if you don't eat Nutella on Passover, then you can use any chocolate spread that you do eat.
Can you use regular flour instead of almond flour?
No, it doesn't give you the lacy, thing that we're looking for. So it's a gluten-free cookie no matter what. But it's not a nut-free cookie. It's always going to be a nutty cookie.
So another one here is rice flour kosher for Passover? I'm not sure that we can really do. Can we do the is it kosher for Passover questions? I think that's more up to the individual.
Yeah, I think it's also like we're not using rice flour for this recipe, but I'm sure that you can definitely Google that and see if it's kosher or if it's kosher for you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not going to work for this recipe anyway.
Someone is asking here, can I use oil instead
of butter?
Yeah.
I wouldn't, because you need a solid fat for this. So I would use either butter or margarine.
Can these be frozen?
I actually never tried freezing them because you eat them so quick. I mean, they're so good. I'm sure you can try. I mean, I don't see any reason why not, really. But they're also really quick to make. So, I mean, we're actually just waiting for this to cool down just a bit. I'm actually going to add some of my vanilla extract and some water just to cool it down a little bit. So I have some water here. I didn't add my egg white yet, but I'm adding about a tablespoon of water and my vanilla, and I'm just whisking this. And yeah, if there are any more questions, then feel free to ask them.
Please describe the chopped nuts consistency. How chopped are the nuts?
I would say sand-like consistency. That's such a specific question. I love it.
All right. Another one is.
I also want to show you the consistency right now after I added my vanilla and my water. So I didn't add the egg white yet, but it's really running, which is what we want. We don't want this to be too stiff. So right before our next question, I am going to add my egg white. So I just added it right in there, and I'm going to whisk it quickly so that it doesn't cook. And then this is a really, really nice consistency. We want this to be runny. Great. So I'm going to let this sit for another minute, and then you can ask questions before we actually put this on our baking sheet.
All right. We have a couple more. How far in advance can you make them? And how many cookies does the recipe make?
So I would say I actually made a batch earlier, but I didn't count them. So I'm going to count them soon. And we're going to check again for how many does it make, because it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's also sandwich cookies. But you can make them, I would say, maybe 2 days in advance. I wouldn't make them like a week in advance because they can get moist, which is not what you want.
Will this work as well with dark brown sugar?
I actually never tried. Dark brown sugar has a different consistency. It's slightly more moist. So you can definitely try, but no guarantees.
Would jam or jelly be a good filling if I can't find Nutella or chocolate sauce that is kosher for Passover?
Sure. If you like the combination of jelly or jam with caramel, then absolutely. Me personally, I'm not a fan. But I don't eat like jam in my souvenir. I love the chocolatey, the butterscotchy filling. So that's just me.
We have a very artistic, can you leave them open-faced and drizzle them with chocolate question.
I mean, I don't see why not. It sounds really creative. I mean, okay, look, you're gonna see the final result, which is like so good. It's such a great bite, but I love, that you're being creative with it, and I don't see any reason why not. It's still gonna be delicious.
I'm combing the chat for more questions.
Amazing. So while you're doing this, I'll just get my sheet trays right here. I actually so I put a baking paper on each sheet pan. I actually used 4 pans earlier, so I'm assuming I'm gonna need 4 again now. And I just want to make sure that you see my trays well.
Yes.
Amazing. So the placing of the batter is so simple. I just want to make sure that it's still runny. Okay, good. It's still runny. I can actually add another maybe teaspoon of water, just because as this cools down, it will get less runny. So I want it to be runny when I put it on my sheet tray. So I'm just whisking it well. Like, this is a really good consistency. I would say it's looking like a pancake batter. So now I'm going to use a teaspoon, and I just want to dollop teaspoon size batter on my sheet tray. And I want to make sure that I'm giving it a roundish shape. Wait, I'm going to take this slightly to the back. There we go. And I want to make sure that I'm going to keep it spaced because they will spread in the oven. So I'm going to do 3 here. And then 2 in the center, and then 3 again. And if they don't come out as a perfect circle, that's totally fine. They're not supposed to look like they're factory made. They're definitely homemade and delicious. And while I'm doing this, my oven is already preheated. So I just want to show you the first batch before we go on to the second one. I'm not going to tilt it too much just because, you can see the amount, right? Great, perfect. So I'm going to put this in the oven for, I would say, 7 to 9 minutes. And as I do that, I'll keep on dolloping the next batch. And yeah, if we have more questions, I would love to answer them.
What size baking sheet are you using?
Ooh, I am not sure. This is actually something that I ordered off Amazon, and I think it is slightly too small for my Israeli oven. I make it work, but I can definitely try and find the link. I don't remember. It's a really good question, though.
Is there an almond flour that is kosher for Passover?
Is there an almond flour that is or isn't?
That is.
I didn't realize there was an almond flour that isn't. So I mean, definitely. I mean, I know that we use it quite often on Passover. So I don't know if you're asking about a brand, then I actually don't know.
Can you use any other ground nuts instead of almonds, like walnuts?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There we go. Second sheet is going into the oven. And now I just want to give a pointer about what's going to happen to these when they're baking. So they're actually going to spread out very much and they're going to start to bubble, which is how the whole lacy factor comes in. So the butter will bubble and then, slight holes will appear and then it will caramelize. It would literally change its color. It will look more ambery. And that's when we'll know that they're done. So after about 7 to 9 minutes, we'll see that they get a nice ambery color, and that's it. They're done. We're going to remove them from the oven, and then once they stop bubbling, we can use them.
When you measure the brown sugar, is it packed or loose?
So we have different light brown sugar here. Unfortunately, I really love the brown sugar that you have in the States, but it's actually more like sugar in the raw, what we have here. So it's, I would say, loose.
Someone has asked, please show the chopped nuts so I can see the consistency. Do you have a comparison point? Someone in the chat said you want a sandy consistency.
Yes, I do want a sandy consistency. I have just a small amount left over, but let me see if I can show you. So I'm literally at the end of this batch, but let me see. So this is literally done. You see this? Is this like, wee? I'm going to show you again. That works, right?
That's great. Thank you also for the instant replay. One other question is, should we use sugar in the raw like Lior is doing, or is the type of brown sugar we have here in the States better?
Wow. I'm not comparing or anything, but the brown sugar you have in the States is really, really good. So, I mean, you could use either. Obviously, it will work if you use sugar in raw, but, if I had packed sugar here, I would definitely use that. Just because, most of the recipes you use actually use packed brown sugar. So that actually works really good. Wow. I mean, the smell here is unbelievable. That's just, when are we going to get that technology that I can actually get the smell through Zoom? Right? So yeah, 4 sheet trays. It's almost done. A lot of cookies. So we have, how many is 8 times 3?
24?
24. And maybe 7 or 8 more. And then divide that by 2, and that's the amount of cookies that we get from this recipe. So 24 plus 8, that would be 32. So that would be 16 cookies. Yeah.
Yes, I preemptively accidentally did bad math, but yes, 16 cookies.
You're so quick and amazing. I am so bad at math. I can't even tell you. But I'm so glad you did it. And then this is the last sheet tray that's going to go into the oven. And even though I baked this in advance, I do want to show you what it looks like right when it comes out of the oven. So we almost have the first batch ready. I'm just going to make sure I don't have the proper space here.
Can you modify the recipe to hold up on cannoli molds?
What? I didn't even understand the question.
Can you modify the recipe, this sounds delicious, to hold up on cannoli molds?
I don't know.
All
Yeah,
right,
just
there's one more, which is where in the oven are the where in the oven are the baking sheets? Are they on the upper level or the middle?
I don't know if you can see my oven, but I literally used all of the levels. I have 4 sheet trays in my oven right now. They're all in there. It's totally fine. That was my timer for the first batch. Let me just check and see if it's ready. But if you're using convection, then you can definitely bake all of them at the same time. I think the first one is not ready yet. So I'm just going to turn this. Might need 1 more minute or so. I mean, it's almost there. It started to caramelize. I will get the cookies that I baked earlier. And then this is the color that we're looking for. And this is that lacy effect that we're looking for. So I don't know if you can see that it's like really nice and lacy. Nice, right? Great. So the first batch will be out in a minute. I will put this right here. And while I have some Nutella here, I also have this chocolate glaze that I made earlier for something really different. But this is 200 grams of bittersweet chocolate with 100 grams of margarine, actually, which, I mean, you could definitely use butter as well. So it was just sitting out for a few hours, and now it's like a nice pasty consistency. So I'll just see. So you can definitely use something like this as well, something that you can make. You can make your own chocolate paste. This is really, really nice, and it's really, really delicious. I think the first batch may be ready to come out of the oven. Yes. Okay. So it's really nice and bubbly. Cute, right? So I'm going to set this right here. And then we have 3 more pans coming right up. That's quite fast. We basically need them to cool off before we can fill them, but I will definitely show the filling on these cookies pretty soon. So they're really nice, and I just want to show you how crisp they are. So I'm going to take a not so pretty one, like this one, okay? And just see, this is pure caramel. So good. So the rest of them are not ready yet. I'm just turning some of the sheet trays, and we're going to give it another minute. We have more questions?
Can I make them in a mini size?
I think so. You could use would you like a half of this, a quarter of this? Maybe you can use like measuring spoons and then do a half of a teaspoon or a quarter, and then, and then it will be mini, that sounds actually delicious. But you will also have to bake them for a few minutes less, probably. So you really have to be on top of it so it doesn't burn.
We have another question here about doing a vanilla filling. Can you, any kind of vanilla filling that you would use?
I mean, you could do I would say you could do a pastry cream, but that's a bit of an overkill. What I would do is I would probably melt some white chocolate and butter like I did here. And I would add some vanilla paste, like the real deal, to this thing. And then that would be my vanilla filling. But if you want to use something that's not chocolate, then I think only a pastry cream. And like I said, I think that's a bit of an overkill. Like that's too much for this cookie. This is like an easy on the go cookie.
We have a couple variants of the same question in the chat,
Okay.
which is how long will they keep if someone wants to make them ahead of time? And should they more not necessarily with the filling, without the filling?
So without the filling, they will keep for longer because obviously the filling will make them moist. So what I would do is after they cool and they're like nice and crisp, I would put them in an airtight container, and I would make sure they're really, really closed properly. And then they could be, I would say maybe a week in advance, you can make them. You can also freeze them probably. If I'm connecting to the question before about freezing them, you can probably freeze them without the filling. And then they will keep better. But I would put maybe a parchment between them so they don't stick, because if you were to, you know, take them out of the freezer and let them thaw, then they would probably stick together because of the caramel. So just make sure that you use parchment.
What's the best way to store them? I'm guessing you touched on the idea of using parchment paper.
Second. So exciting. Yeah, so I would definitely use an airtight container with parchment between the layers, and that would be the best way. Just make sure that your container is really like I wouldn't use, a loosely closed cookie jar or something like that. Like you want to make sure that they stay dry.
I love your kitchen.
Thank you.
If I use an aluminum foil pan, must I grease it or line it? Or can I just drop the dough on the bare pan?
I would line it with a baking sheet either way. Like I wouldn't use just grease for this because caramel, once it cools, it will stick. So I would say for this, you have to line it with a sheet paper, baking paper. Yeah, I know like some people try to be more green nowadays and not use paper as much, but I would say for the caramel ones, you have to.
Do you let the cookies cool on the baking sheet? And why are the cookies greasy when you take them out of the oven? Should you dry them on paper towels before storing them?
So I would say, I mean, they're not exactly greasy. They're shiny because of the caramel. And again, we have a lot of butter here, so maybe that's why they would appear greasy. You really don't need to dry them on a paper towel or anything like that. It's just gonna, as you can see, I let them cool on the baking sheets, which is totally fine. And that's about it. Like you see, I touch this, it's really shiny, but it's not greasy. I have no grease on my hands. So what I would do now is I would try to kind of make pairs. Like I would want them to be at about the same shape and size. So this is a nice pair, and I would just line them here. And then we're going to use them to make our sandwiches. So I kind of ruined one, which is fine. That's our snacky cookie. And then it's, like I said, it's really okay if they're not 100% the same, because we're not working in a factory. This is homemade. It's supposed to be homemade. It's supposed to look homemade. It's gonna be delicious. Some of mine are actually oval, which is fine. And this is a really big cookie. So cool. I don't know if, like, can you see the light through it? That's what I'm trying to show. Yeah, you can see the light through it. Great. That's kind of what I was going for the whole lacy thing. And then after we make the pears, then we can fill them with whatever filling we want. So I think I'm going to use both of my fillings, both my homemade chocolate filling and my, oh, these actually, are they more the same? Maybe. This is a fun job as well. Just, finding the pears. Weirdly fun, I would say. Oh, this is also broken? It's all part of the same cookie. Oh, yay. Perfect. I guess the cookie that I broke was the one extra. So I have exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pairs. That's really great. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to start with this homemade chocolate filling. I'm going to take the first pair and I just want to, use a nice layer, but I don't want it to be, too heavy on the filling. And then I'm just going to sandwich it, press it, and that's our cookie. And I'm going to do another one with Nutella, which I love. Ooh. You can actually use a little bit more Nutella. These are so yum. So I'm going to press it down. And I'm actually going to taste it just for all your sake. So yum. Delicious. Then I have Nutella on my face, but that's okay. It's so great and crunchy. I love it. Do we have more questions?
So far, no.
Amazing. Wow.
Just kidding.
This part is
When is that?
Just kidding. I love it. You had me there. Great. Okay. Yeah. Talk to me. I'm yours.
So when is that chocolate spread used? I think Bess is asking about the homemade chocolate spread, which is, I think, not the Nutella.
Not the Nutella, this one. When, like, how long after I made it?
I think so.
Okay. So I actually made this like 3 hours ago. And I'm assuming my kitchen is probably warmer than yours because it's basically summer here. So I would say, about 2 hours at room temperature, or you can even, pop it in the fridge for about a half an hour just so it sets, because it is so nice and spreadable. Like I wouldn't leave it in the fridge like overnight because you don't want it to be stone cold, but you can definitely use it once it gets to room temperature, which is what you want. So I would maybe put it in the fridge for about a half an hour and then I would just mix it. And then if it's at this consistency, which is like your every other chocolate spread, then I would use it at this point. And it's not too runny.
Is this recipe in your cookbook?
It's not actually, but it is on my blog.
What's the ratio of chocolate to butter for the spread?
So it's 1 to 2. So that's 200 grams of chocolate and 100 grams of butter or margarine. No judgment.
Are you spreading the chocolate spread on the inside? I think this is another question from Bess about how to construct. Yeah. Can you give us a close-up of the sandwich?
Absolutely. And I can also do another one if you want. So
Sounds
this is my pear. So this is the outer part. This is the inner part. They look very similar, but the outer part has more of a texture. So I want to spread my spread on the inner part. And I don't want to go too heavy on the spread. So I just want to make sure that there's a nice even layer. And then I'm going to take the other cookie, inner part as well. I'm going to press it. And there we go. Gorgeous.
What is your blog?
Boo! Yes. So it's Lioo. No, I'm sorry, I misspelled my own name. It's LiorOosh.com. And it's also where you can find me on Instagram. So that's Lioroosh. So LiorOosh. So that's 4 times O after you spell Lior properly, not the way I did it the first times. Happens to all of us.
Do we have any more questions? Are we wrapping up at 1:15, I think?
Sure.
I can't
Which
remember.
is quite soon. So, if you have any more questions for me, by all means, I would love to answer them. I'm going to take another bite as you do. Because why not? So good.
Robin,
That crunch.
what else are you cooking and serving for Passover?
That's a really good question. I just wrote a recipe for a flourless chocolate cake. No almonds, no nuts in it, just fluffy, fudgy chocolate cake that's actually not too dense, which is really, really nice. I actually made, do you know the Israeli snack krembo? Actually has a Danish, you know it. So I made a gluten-free vegan version of that today. That's actually why I made this chocolate spread, because I used it to top the krembo with. So that's really nice. And I just wrote the menu for our Seder today, which is really, really nice. I'm gonna do, it's a very small group this year, so I'm gonna do just, the top dishes. And I'm gonna do what my grandma used to do. She's not with us anymore, but she used to hide like 2 batches of matzah bread in the kitchen. And all of the grandkids, before we start reading the Haggadah, would go in the kitchen and we would know that it's, hidden there. And we would snack on that so that we would, be able to last until the food part comes on. So I'm definitely going to do that. I do that every year since I'm hosting the Seder. So, the small things that remind you of your childhood home.